Welcome everyone to Hunt the Habitat. A great dog and a shotgun will only get you so far in the uplands. In this podcast, Ann Jandernaw helps us to attain a more in-depth understanding of the birds we love to hunt, their habits, their habitat, and how those change through the year and through the hunting season. Hunt the habitat, find the birds. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to our latest edition of Hunt the Habitat with Ann Jandernaw, brought to you by Scout and Hunt Maps. My name is Steve Blazer, and Ann, we made it through the winter doldrums. We're going to get the podcast going again.
Yep. There's not a lot to talk about. Either it snowed, or it didn't snow, or it was 35 below, and I kid you not, and it wasn't just one or two times. So this spring, there's been about 50 plus inches of frost that needed to come out of the ground because there wasn't much snow. And it's just, there's not really a lot going on. I can tell you the snowshoe population is on the low end of their cycle, since there's only 3 or 4 hopping around here compared to the 10 to 20 that used to be 3 years ago. But I think these winters that we've had where there's not much snow and you're a white snowshoe is not good for the snowshoe.
That's not good for the longevity of the average snowshoe, is it?
No, unfortunately not.
Well, and your snow came late. You got lots of snow, but it came late, didn't it?
No, we didn't get a lot of snow. We didn't get much. It was south of us that got more.
Okay.
Now, up in the Keweenaw, where my parents' place is, they got a good hard winter up there. Not so much with the cold. When someone opens a faucet of snow up there, it just keeps coming and you think the pipes have broke. So they had a really good winter up there, so there's plenty of snow. And with that being said, when you look at the U.S. Drought Monitor, and you may think, oh, cripes, this is rather early to look at this. Well, you have to, because like beforehand, there was a little bit of drought in the southwest of the UP, but there's been an ongoing abnormally dry. We were in a moderate drought for a while in northern Wisconsin. And then there's parts of Minnesota that are pretty dry. Now, you run out to the northeast and Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, New York, they look good. Most of Michigan looks good, other than we can forget the drought part. The ice storm that they had back at the tail end of March took out close to 1 million acres in 12 different counties of forest land. So if you're planning a hunt to the northern part of the lower, you might want to check out what counties were affected by this before you go. There's thousands of acres in Pigeon River State Forest area is one of them that has been just devastated. So better figure out what's going on before you actually go up there.
You wanted to talk about spring a little bit, but you wanted to dissect spring a little bit.
So many times we say the word spring, but it's not as simple as saying springtime. There's a lot of sublayers to it. And if you think about grouse, their entire existence is based on change. For them, it's survival, or it's adapting to the shifting landscape that they have. But each season has transitions within the season. So it's a different way to look at it. So right now, what they're going through, they had the first part of it where basically you had the snow, but it's starting to warm up. It's like, it's your first time. It's like, oh, I think spring is coming. And the males will get a little more active around their sites. They'll patrol a little bit more. But remember, it's still white snow out there. And there's like any movement, a predator can see that contrast of brown over the snow very easily. So they're doing that. And the females, well, they're moving around a little bit more because they've been in their group, moving from one male habitat to the other. But now they're starting to stretch out their range just a little bit. Still keeping to the shadows, still realizing that their coloration is not helping them when they move out in the open because there's such a good contrast there for any predator to really have the advantage. And then as the temperatures are turning warmer, and what the next key is, the percentage of snow that you're losing, that's starting to also create a shift, which is part of the daylight. You also have the temperature, and then you slowly start to lose that snowpack. And in the beginning, when the snowpack goes, you see anything piled up or anything in the open or around the trees and things of that nature. But when you think about the drumming log, is typically sort of somewhat shaded if it had full foliage around it, because it needs a shrub overstory for protection. But a lot of the log is still covered in snow. And you'll find the droppings in the woods where the grouse have left their mark. This male has said, okay, this is my area. Or you might see wingtip drags in the woods. That is really a symbol of a boundary for a male grouse to basically tell another male, get the heck out of here. And you might see some of these birds come out in the open a little bit and strut. I had one strutting just as it came through the gate, and I looked over to my left, and there's a bird out in the middle, and it's a male, and it's all puffed up, strutting around, and I'm thinking, are you stupid or what? Yeah, you're someone's lunch. Get back in there. But you're starting to do things like that. And usually the first drumming I ever hear is at night. There may still be a little bit of snow on the ground, but at night, doesn't matter. You don't have a contrast. It's just dark. So the amount of snow really dictates a lot more on how much they move, because they're basically like being right out in the open. When the snow is about 30 to 40% gone, you'll start seeing the male grouse getting a little bit closer into his log. The hens will start to branch out a little bit more, but when it gets down to like only 30% or less of snow, that's usually when I start to hear the first drumming going on. And you might see the birds coming more out into the open, which when that grouse was out in the open, we had already lost quite a bit of snow. So it had started a little bit, and then with the snowstorm, I doubt if he went back out in the open for a while. But I would say by the end of the week he will, because the snow will be gone in those places. So there's just not so much times when as a kid growing up, you think of, okay, winter into spring, I mean, different clothes, flowers are coming up, I get to run around, play more outside, or you have the mud part of spring when it's all sort of nasty, which that was always a great time. Maybe not for my mom, but for me. I couldn't miss a mud puddle.
Why is that not a surprise?
I don't know. It's sort of like with bulldozers. Or let's go play. Hey, some people grow up, and I've grown up in some ways, but there's other ways. Forget it. It's not worth it. So, and then you get to the point the ground's bare, and it's like at that point, game on, because it's like, okay, now the ground's bare. Now we got brown on brown. So it helps as far as predators. And typically, the avian predators are not back up north yet. So it's like it's not that they don't have a care in the world. They still have to be very cautious. But when those avian predators show up, because it's like the grouse that was stupid enough to stand in the middle of the road all of a sudden is now in the shadows.
Or lunch.
Or lunch, yeah, or lunch. How they sense that and know that, the hawks are back is beyond me. To cue in. And so what I'm saying when I talk about cueing in is that they are so sensitive about the changes, the little changes from spring, from losing winter into spring, and then there's all these subtle steps it's like you have to make to eventually get to summer. It's not just say it's springtime. For the grouse, it's many stages within springtime. And so you get to where the first flowers are blooming, and they switch over to some of the flowering catkins, and then they'll start eating the tips of ferns or some of the bunchberries. They'll eat little vegetation. The insects aren't even in play. And that's the other thing. You can't have a brood be born when there's no insects.
Right.
So that timing has to time with the insects. So there's so many different aspects of their life that has to mesh together with the seasons. And it's more like, what are the steps with these seasons? And there's definitely a step that you have to go for each section of it, because in each section they're doing something different. And once that ground is bare, then the hens are like moving around. If it's soaking wet and storming in that, the hens are in a holding pattern. And basically they won't move and no one will start drumming till it gets a little bit better. I mean, there's males that drum a little bit, but not the normal. And the females need to hear consistent drumming to draw them in. It's like triangulating. Okay, I think I hear one over here, but I'm not sure if I haven't heard anything for quite a while. So there's that, the type of weather that's they have to drum with, and can she hear it? And then the first flowers come up, and like the texture and the food sources and all that start to become available, and the males are drumming, and they're competing for dominance and the attention of the hens, and that's your time. So we've gone from winter to less snow to a little more movement to spending more time on the log to the females trying to branch out a little bit because they're going to break up and go their separate ways and try to find a male. And it's not like they're all going to show up together. This is one, set your schedule. I'm next. So, anyways, you go, the snow mostly gone, then the ground is bare. The grouse are like, oh, great, this is awesome. And then all of a sudden, about the time the grass starts to poke up is about the time the hawks show up. And then when the hawks show up, then a lot of the grouse are basically more like, well, I think I need to behave here a little bit. It's just, I know this is out. I can't go out and open like I'd like to, but we're just going to stick in the shadows more. And then there comes the time after you've had the spring rains that the grass starts to grow. And that's really about the time you see the grouse stop moving a lot. And what's happening is when that grass gets so high, it's getting to be taller in some places than the grouse. Think about the old walking trails that haven't been mowed or along the edges and things like that. Any predator can hide in that. Think about it. It doesn't take much for a weasel to hide, and a weasel can kill a grouse.
Oh, easily.
So we're talking somewhere between 6-7 inches and up, somewhere in there. So that's sort of a signal like, well, do we really want to move and cross through here, or what are we going to do? And then we have the leaves emerge, and then that basically summer is starting to take its turn. So when you think about springtime is a time of a lot of changes, a lot of things going on for the grouse, and depending on the winter, sometimes it's good to have a little bit of downtime, because if it was a harsh winter, they don't need to be fighting to get food. They need to get food easily and put weight back on. So that's the spring breakdown.
Now, when we get the inevitable late snow, that pushes things back, basically puts the brakes on everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, it just goes into a holding pattern again. This is when you get the drumming counts all messed up. Because when they go into a holding pattern, and it's getting closer, at least up here around the 18th of April, and they go into a holding pattern, no one's happy. The time's ticking by, and it's like they're all like, okay, we're ready to go. And then all of a sudden you have that morning that's beautiful, and you literally will see grouse all over the place, crossing the roads, moving, and then you'll hear lots and lots of drumming going on. It's pretty incredible, actually. But it doesn't build. It just all of a sudden, whoop, we're here, let's get it going.
Yeah.
And most of the time, it gradually builds. And a lot of that is based on a lot of the protection that a male has within a site. It's not always, some sites that are basically chosen by a juvenile won't be as secure as one that's by an older male. So that's how it works out with the grouse in the springtime. At this point, we're going to go to another recording that Steve and I have done about when he visited here and got to see the woodcock and the sky dance.
We're heading back, and and pulled up on a little 2-track, driving through some really young aspen. What would you say, 5 years old?
Yeah, 5 to 6, something
5
like
to 6
that.
years old. And she pulled up there, killed the truck, and she said, "Come on out, let's listen." It was very cool because we could hear the woodcock, and we got to watch them do their sky dance.
But it was
And
even better than that.
it was even better than that because about 5 minutes after we got out of the truck, one walked out from one side of the clear cut, one side of the road. Another one walked out from the other side of the road.
And one flew in.
And
They made it.
You had said that you had never actually seen that before.
No, I had never seen it. I've seen other males chase off some woodcock because of their territory, and I've had it shine the lights, and I can see the hens just sitting in the cover, but not where they actually mate. With all the different ones that I was hearing in the beginning, there was at least 7 or 8 on either side of the road that I could pick up different peents. And I think as the nighttime came, we're right at the part of dusk. We're at the point where you just now have to turn on your lights. And you could still look up in the sky and see them a little bit up there when they're doing their sky dance. And the cool part is that if more than one lands, you can sort of walk over there and be real quiet, and they'll start landing a lot of times almost in the same area. You'll get pretty close to them and hear, oops, here they come, which is pretty neat.
Yeah. Yeah. There was one, we watched it launch and land about 4 times. And the last time it went up, while it was in the air, and they get up there, there are a lot of our listeners that have seen this numerous times. I hadn't. Okay, I'd never been up in the North Woods that time of year other than maybe turkey hunting. I mean, they're up there 250 feet.
They're a long ways up.
Yeah, they're way up there. And so one launched itself up, and Ann motions to me, and we go over and we stationed ourselves maybe 10 yards from where it launched. And sure enough, it came back down, and it landed, 10, 15 yards from where we were?
It was really close.
Yeah. It was kind of neat. It really was. Just fascinating.
Yeah, there was a lot of birds. It just wasn't the whole road that they liked. There was one area that they all liked.
Yes.
But it was a good evening because the next day it just rained like heck toward the end of the day. The rain came in and the thunderstorms. So that was good. I really thought that we might not see that many because it's a little late right now. Right now is when you go into the first of the drumming season, and you might hear some, because you got to remember, I'm farther north than anyone that would hear drumming south of me. That's already been there going on type thing. But typically the 18th through the end of the month and just right into the first week of May, it's about peak time for drumming. The other night I was driving the back roads here, and 10 minutes I saw 6 different grouse crossing the road. So it's the shuffle. It's called the spring shuffle is what's going on with the grouse. So and that's a cool time too, finding areas where there's more grouse drumming.
Well, just driving back from the restaurant on the way to where we saw the woodcock, we saw, 5, 6.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're all pausing and listening, and then they dart off. And I was able to check out a drumming site, and it was probably one of the most unique drumming sites I've seen in a long time. And have you ever watched a grouse on a drumming log? Other than Charlie.
Charlie was the only one I've physically seen drumming.
We walked in on one and it flushed, but what was so interesting, there was the option of 2 logs there. And when you look at it, the bird literally had to make a choice between these 2 logs. And at first glance, you'd think, oh, doesn't matter. Well, it really does, because there was the one behind the other one, and they're both had fallen in the same direction. So it's like you could stand on one log and literally stride across over to the next log, a little ways from it. But in between the two logs, the shrub component had grown up. And this bird drummed both to the east and to the west, but primarily it drummed more to the west than the east, which is reverse of what they typically do. But when you look at it, he had his back covered better when he drums to the west, so he doesn't have to worry about because he's got more concealment. Whereas if he drums to the east, he's not as protected. So it's just he can see more to the west.
Mhm.
So that was interesting. And then we managed to flush a woodcock there that morning.
Yes,
So,
we did. Yeah.
and then you got to see a backyard drummer, but he didn't
We
drum.
did.
He snuck off his log, but it was a
Hmm.
huge log too.
He had quite an audience.
Yeah, yeah, half the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Where we were is that Al and Mary Ann have had, I bet, 5 or 6 birds break windows.
So one of Ann's friends in town has this huge tree that has fallen at the back of his lot line. And he said he's had a grouse. It can't be the same grouse, but he said he's had a bird on that spot for 7 years?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And his first comment when we walked up was, I didn't know they drummed all winter and all through the night.
Yeah, they're a bit busy.
At 2:30 in the morning in February, this thing's drumming.
His wife wasn't impressed.
No, she wasn't.
And the next door neighbors, they're the ones that keep losing windows. I'm not kidding. Over all the years, which has probably been 30 years, that 6 or 7 windows have been broken because of grouse. I mean, they've called me up and said, Ann, you want to come over and get the grouse? I said, why? Well, it's dead inside the house. I said, I wonder if your insurance claim is going to believe this. I said, well, we can show them a picture of the dead grouse in the broken window, and it's in the living room. And one day they had 2 of them go kamikaze to the garage. Remember that one. So, but yeah, it's an interesting neighborhood when it comes to grouse.
Is it a little early for this much drumming?
No, we're right on schedule.
We are. Okay.
Yep, we're right on schedule with it. So, and we had some really nice rain for the first time where we actually had puddles. The waters come up in the streams, and we haven't had it like this for a while. So I suspect the next drought report might see us be taken off the list possibly as normal. It will be normal instead of abnormally dry, because we were in a moderate to a severe drought by the time fall came last year.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes, it was dry. Crazy. Well, we talked about how it affected the woodcock migration, where they came through and it just didn't stay.
Well, and it shifted everything ahead of schedule, too, because the food sources had changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we're talking about drumming, but just a little cautionary tale to everybody. You talk about this every year. There are limitations to what you see in drumming reports.
Oh,
correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I was able to explain it to Steve as we stood there in this one place. We could hear drummers, 2 over on one side, the one that we were by, one over. There was about 5 or 6 total somewhere in there. And if you stood there long enough, they're typically the 15, 20 minutes that these people stand there. Okay, this one's a little sporadic. This guy's sort of sporadic. This guy likes to drum. But I don't know, the one guy over here on the right, he's drumming all the time. Well, of course, he's got a hen nearby because he's drumming that figure. So that really runs the numbers up for that area. So it's not always just what you think. It's just, there's a reason that the drumming counts don't always work. And then sometimes people are disappointed is because it's counting the duplicate drumming of maybe 1, 2, or 3 or 4 birds. And that's okay. And it's really hard for anyone that's doing the counts to do a stopwatch on these birds. Because when a hen's around, it'll be close to a minute or 2 minutes or whatever they drum. Like I'm here, and the closer the bird is, they're bringing her in, enticing her, trying to impress her to come in. And if no one's got any actions, then it could be every 12 to 16 minutes that they're drumming. But if they're competing, just drummer to drummer, and they can hear each other, it could be 4 to 8 minutes. But when they get down below that 4 minute, they can run the numbers and really askew them. So it's just, I think it's really some of the areas that you might get information about, and drumming's good, is means that there's some really good habitat there. And that's a lot of it. To me, it really tells about the habitat. So, but everyone has their own thoughts on it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, getting back to the habitat, and again, we've covered this before, but this is the time of year people are out listening. It's when you are somewhere and you are hearing different drummers from different directions that tells you you're in good habitat, correct?
Well, it's part of that, but it also can be, you got to weigh in the fact is how much of it's old and how much of it's really the right age and up and coming.
Mm-hmm.
That's the big thing. But yes, you've got good habitat, but that good habitat, some of it may be too young yet, too. So you're going to have to look at the maps, look at the age of the cuts,
Mm-hmm.
and then relate to it, to where you're at.
Okay.
It may just be telling you that you got something coming up in the next year or two, that the birds are already starting to populate an area, but it's not really yet ready to put the dog into it, possibly.
Yeah, when we were driving around, you pointed out some cuts that were pretty trashy.
Mm-hmm.
That you wouldn't want your dog in there.
Yeah, there's nothing like starting the season out with a dog with a lame shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
It won't recover soon enough to really run it the way you want it to by the end of the season. You just messed your whole season up.
One of the things that we talked about a lot while we were driving around, and you did a really outstanding job illustrating it to me. And remember, everybody, I'm a slow learner. Is we're differentiating different cuts, and again, this is a good time to scout. People are driving around; they're looking at things. I've got a couple of buddies that drove to northern Wisconsin 2 weeks ago just to drive around and scout. And you talked about looking at two cuts and differentiating them by their hardwood content, even though you were looking at two young cuts that were close to being huntable or maybe were huntable. But you would point at the cut and you go, no, look at that. There's too much maple. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that was a little bit eye-opening for me.
A lot of people judge cuts by how much conifer and stuff is mixed in it, and that judging with the conifer and the cut mix really is late season.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not worried about conifers in the beginning of the season. What I'm looking at is the stem density, especially in the beginning. And you have to think about, what have these young chicks been imprinted with? Where has the mother raised them? And the stem density has to be really good where they're at to offer them the protection they need to basically live and not be someone else's meal, and to escape and to have all the bugs and the other small plants that they feed on later on. And it's really important. So when you think about it, these birds are basically being imprinted, and of course they've got the genetic inclination to be in a certain type of habitat. And that habitat isn't, oh, we have pines here and we have this here and we have that here. It's, where did their mother raise them? And it's all based on stem density, which then provides the canopy cover to protect them. And if the stem density isn't good enough, then what you have is grass and other problems on the floor. That these are not pheasants, these are grouse chicks, and no different than with woodcock chicks. They do a lot of moving around. Aspen regenerates through the root system. And of course, they also regenerate with the flowering catkins that are happening right now. But you've seen the aspen habitat where it looks like there's a line of trees basically that are in a line. Well, that's because they sprouted off the root system. But when you get red maple, you get oak, and maybe even some basswood, they sprout off the stump. And that's different. It's a clump of trees that come out of there, not single ones. It's good and it's short-lived, but it's not like an aspen cut because the red maple will grow very quickly, shade out the aspen, and then it becomes sparse in those aspen areas where these trees are getting shade out. So the whole process is like more compact. And the other thing too is the leaf litter, in part of when you look out east, a lot of what they're in is sugar maple cuts. And the woodcock just love them because if you were to kick those leaves away, it's like worm bedding underneath there. There's a different speed of decay of the leaves. The aspen leaves break down very quickly, whereas the sugar maple leaves don't break down as quick. And so clumps are not as good as singular structure of aspen density, a cut that has density, because the density in an aspen cut will be more even than the density of an aspen mixed with hardwood. It'll be uneven and it'll become more sporadic sooner as to what's open and what's not open. So, and the speed of growth. So, aspen is a fast-growing tree, and red maple is fast-growing, decays quick. Sure, basswood's the same way. Out. I mean, you're going to take what you've got to work with. I get that. But if I have the choice to choose, I'm going to be looking at pure aspen. And because I know in my terms and where I've hunted that that's what I'm looking for. It's not, I'm not saying don't hunt the other, but judge the stem density. Whether you do have a mix or whatever, look at the stem density. Think about the foliage that would be on there and how protected is it. And the problem is when you have sugar maples and some of the oaks in that, you don't get as much small plants coming up because the soil changes a bit. So there's just little things. I mean, you can look at an area and say, oh, it looks fantastic. If you can, go back in and look at it when the small plants are there. You'll see the differences in, okay, we've got a nice carpet here, small plants and everything, and then, oh, let's go over here. Not a whole lot around here. You got two different types of trees growing, and the speed of the rate of the growth is different for each one.
And it's still an aspen cut. I mean, what you pointed out to me, it's still an aspen cut, okay? But it's got those, in
clumps.
This case, it was, red maple sprinkled in there.
It's not to not hunt it. It's just I'm nitpicky on what I want. That's all. I'm very fussy about what I want in a cut. And it's all based on structure, density.
Okay.
And that's a whole different ballgame when it comes middle to late fall. I change what I want. So I know what I'm going to start out with and then what I'm going to transition to. And the reason why it correlates with where do the chicks come from? The chicks come from a place of great stem density. And the mother is going to try to get them someplace where there's really good stem density. And that's what those birds are going to live in. Now, unfortunately, sometimes that stem density is an alder area, and then it floods. But think about the alders, how thick they are. Think about the thick aspen, how thick they are. And both have a good canopy. It's just one is in a lower elevation than the other and can flood periodically.
Okay. Thank you. It was a good lesson for me. It really was. Because, again, we're in northern Wisconsin. We're driving around, and there's cuts everywhere. And your point about being fussy is a good one.
No, I'm fussy on a lot of things.
Yeah. Apple pie.
Well, yeah, I got spoiled with an apple pie, and thank you, Lori, for the apple pie. I think it was funnier that it's almost 10 o'clock and we're talking and I'm wanting apple pie.
Well, you should have said something. So when I went up and visited Ann, my wife made an apple pie for me to bring up because we all know, everybody write this down, Ann likes pie.
Oh, yes. That was good. That was good for about 50 miles of driving. What's the thing is, he's got an apple pie in his vehicle. And here it is. I'm thinking, shit, no, I'm not going to bed without apple pie. And I'm looking at it like, where's the pie?
You should have said something. So finally, we're about ready to turn, and I said, oh, well, probably have some apple pie for lunch tomorrow. And she said, we're going to have some of that right now. I still love that big old guy that you've got.
Yeah, that's retired here now.
She's got a retired big old setter that came from a friend of hers that couldn't take care of him anymore, and he is just the most lovable big old guy. He's kind of a roan colored, and he's just gorgeous. He's just a sweetie.
He spends more time sleeping.
Yeah.
Than that. Well, you forgot to tell the fun part of the story with the apple pie.
When you took a little bit of Cool Whip and put it on the top of the dog's head.
Yeah. Went over and rolled in the dog bed.
Well, his buddies help him clean it up too. So.
I mean, don't give me a spray can with whipped cream. It's funny what can happen.
She was torturing her dogs.
Yeah. But no, the pie was excellent. And that, I mean, your wife just does unbelievable work. It was like a masterpiece.
Mm-hmm. Well, as I've said before, I did not have this waistline when we met. So.
Maybe she should start making and selling apple pies. I'd probably just talk myself out of more dessert.
No. What else did you want to cover this evening?
Ticks are out. Make sure that you got your collars and all your medication going and everything like that. Another thing that I would recommend, talk to your different vets. There are some of the treatments for heartworm that is some of the areas are having problems with resistance. Talk to the vet, see if there's any cases of resistant heartworm treatments. The dog's been on the medication and it still tests positive. You need to dig a little bit. It's going to happen. It's no different than farming. There was when we would spray the weeds and everything. Eventually, those weeds became resistant to it, and that's why Roundup and other products like that were developed. I'm not an advocate of it, but that was just part of it. That was the first example I ever was experienced to, was something like that. And it's no different than other tick-borne diseases. And I guess I'll research it, but there's supposed to be a new one out east now, another tick-borne issue.
Oh, so. Great. That's where Lyme's originated, too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And well, it's really bad out there, and it's spreading. So, but just make sure that you check them. And I guess I'm already hearing from people that because it wasn't that harsh of a winter in some of the areas, yeah, you got snow, but it wasn't super cold. Ticks have been active a little bit earlier than most people expected. Oh.
And spray yourself. Spray your boots, spray your pants, spray your socks.
Yep.
Take care of you, too.
Yep. I showed you what you want to avoid as far as weeds. It's that flaxen color, foxtail.
Mm-hmm.
It's right on the edges, and it's in young cuts, and especially prevalent in sandier soils. So that's something, look up foxtail, because I'll avoid it like everything. It just seems to be a place where the ticks hang out. So, but no, it was good driving around. It was good seeing the woodcock. Good to see the grouse. I've seen activity. Seems like the old saying is that when the robins show up, they'll get snowed on 3 times and then spring's here. Well, ours got snowed on about 7 or 8 times. I sort of threw that saying right out the window. this year. But as far as the year, just sort of basically start doing your homework right now. Start planning on where you're going to hunt and think about it and keep track of your drought. Keep track of your wet. We're all thinking about, okay, we got drought now, but what about wet? I'll be really interested to see how the drought index changes for our area. And even like Minnesota, they've got some drought going on up there. So you're going to want to keep track of what the weather's like for the hatch in the areas that you hunt and start making the plans and looking at where you can go hunt. Good time to have you come up, good time going over stuff and everything. And I don't like to talk a lot in the wintertime because there's really nothing to talk about. So, and I'm just not going to talk for a podcast just for the sake of talking.
Okay.
But yeah, if you got questions, give us a holler. If you're wanting some feedback on areas, let me know. I usually can tell you what areas are like. Well, that's that.
And if you have questions, where should they send the questions?
To the contact form on mobilehuntingmaps.com. There's a form there that you can fill out.
All right. And on that note, Ann, thanks. And we will talk to you next time. And everybody, always remember to hunt the habitat.